Would have thought that we would get this all planned. We had a vision that UK would be in the playoffs right where they are in Catlanta, and we'd be holding this breakfast here. So I give all the credit back to Katie and Linda and the group that decided that we're going to have our Good Morning Bluegrass venue right here. So I want to take a poll. How many people think the Wildcats will beat the, who they playing? Hoosiers tonight. Yeah, let's get a little excitement going here. And no, I didn't wear a red tie because of Indiana. I've already been told. I've already got the message. I have become very strong in my beliefs of the Commonwealth. This is to honor Louisville for their victory last night. Actually, I'm trying to figure out a good reason, which I can't. But what we try to do, and I'm looking at, this is an incredible who's who crowd. What we always try to do is to bring something before our membership that's different, thought-provoking, something that's going to make us think, something that's going to push us. Some people may like things that you hear today and some people may not, but you know what's great about Lexington and Central Kentucky is we can have these open conversations about issues that in the past may have divided us, and today we can have the same conversations and we can build on them and we can make things better. And I don't know about you, but I would say in the last 5 to 10 years here in the Bluegrass, we have changed so dramatically. It's because of the leadership of people like you in this room. It's because of all the volunteer efforts that you've had and how you've pushed agendas forward. It's how we've been able to get over some of the things that have divided us in the past. But guess what? Those rankings keep coming in and we keep going up higher. And when you get in that top 10 level, it's always good to break the top 5 and the top 2 or 3, but people around the country are recognizing us for things other than just basketball. But now when you have a great basketball team, guess what? We all get elevated even more. And it's great when we get elevated for education, our quality of living, our quality of life, and other aspects. So this morning, we have the Arena Arts and Entertainment District Task Force. They're going to share their ideas on a revamped Rupp Arena, Lexington Center, and a downtown, and they're going to talk about what it's going to look like, potentially, could look like, and what that can mean for us. Lessons learned, ideas that are going to be shared, different people having different ideas and making us think differently. And so we're looking forward to that. But also I want to recognize, before I have our group come up, the folks who make this event happen. And our longtime presenting sponsor, I'm going to have Mike Ash come up in just 1 minute, but I want to introduce all of our sponsors first. But our longtime sponsor of this event has been Fifth Third Bank. Mike, appreciate that. And we got the leadership of the bank here with us this morning. Thank you. Our gold sponsors, Integrity IT, Travel Host of the Bluegrass, WKY 91.3 FM. Our silver sponsors, BD's Mongolian Grill, the Berry Company, Bluegrass Community and Technical College, Cardinal Hill Rehabilitation Hospital, Lexington Center Corporation, the Waffle House, Windstream Communications, and our small business sponsors, Missing Link Managed Services and Progressive Marketing. At this point, I want Mike Ash to come up, our presenting sponsor, and to say a word or two. Mike, thank you, and thank you, Fifth Third Bank.
Thank you, Bob, and good morning. It is an exciting time to be living in the Bluegrass, especially on a day like today, not only because we have such a great opportunity tonight, which I know all of us will be up late tonight, so thank you for being here so early this morning, to witness the opportunity to go to the Elite Eight, but we're in an incredible location to talk about a very thought-provoking idea for downtown Lexington. So it is an exciting time, and I think really, it's an exciting time because of the community leaders that we have here in Lexington who have spent an incredible amount of time and energy coming up with some very thought-provoking ideas to make this community a stronger one. The Arena Arts and Entertainment District Task Force are going to share these ideas on a revised Rupp, Lexington Center, and downtown, and what it will look like and mean for us as a community. And this project lends itself to considerate, innovative thinking. It's a challenging endeavor, but one that deserves thoughtful and thoughtful consideration for everything that they're going to present. Fifth Third Bank has been a long-time presenting sponsor of Commerce Lexington's Good Morning Bluegrass because, like you, we are curious. and we are curious about how we can develop better solutions for our clients. And we as a community are curious to see what we can do to make ourselves a better community. So with that, I want to just thank Bob and his team for an incredible program that we're going to experience today, for the great location that we get to hear this in, and doing it on such an incredible, exciting day during March Madness. So Bob, thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. The mayor and I were talking last night, or actually we were texting back and forth, and he had every intention of being here this morning. I think all of you know that his mother, who was an outstanding individual, passed this past week, and so as we were texting back and forth, it seemed pretty obvious to me, though I know he wanted to be here. There's another place he needed to be. Today's the funeral. It's in Glasgow, so I was very honored that he would have pushed the envelope that long to want to stay here, but it seemed to make a lot more sense that he be with family. So anyway, that's the reason that the mayor's not here. He wanted me to share. He's here in mind and spirit, and he wants to be partners with us as we go forward on this project and many others that'll come up. But anyway, I just want to let you know why the mayor is not here this morning. At this point, I would like our star-studded panel to come on up, and I'm going to have Bill Lear, who is going to be our MC. He's going to introduce the panel, and we're going to get right into the thick of this conversation, a discussion that's going to go on for a period of time, and a new vision, a new look, some new ideas. Bill Lear.
My seat up there.
Thank you, sir.
Y'all hear me all right? I'm wired like the Secret Service.
I think the thing is set up.
Jim Gray, in addition to having already asked me to MC this, Jim Gray asked me if I would pinch hit for him this morning and say a word of welcome. I'm wired up from behind. I can assure you that's not my wallet hitting this. It's not big enough. Anyway, I want to welcome you to Rupp Arena, but not for basketball action. It just doesn't sound the same. When the mayor asked me to MC this, he had seen some of the presentations I previously made at Commerce of Lexington dinners. And therefore he said, we want you to MC this, but you may not make fun of or crack jokes about Steve Beshear, David Williams, Greg Stumbo, the Kentucky General Assembly, Jim Gray, the Urban County Council, Eli Capilouto, Dudley. I think Dudley's here. You don't even have to say his last name anymore. He's so well known. One of these days, he's going to be like Prince. We'll refer to him as the developer, formerly known as Dudley. But I'm not going to make any jokes about him. Centerpoint, Terry McBrayer, Omar Gaddafi, Idi Amin, Francisco Franco, Madonna are big-ass fans. That leaves me with only this to say, how about them cats? There are a few other things that the mayor wanted me to share with you this morning, and I will before I introduce the panelists. Today's program is about dreaming big, and what you're going to see today is a very big dream and making those dreams come true. Every city that wants to be better than it is needs a big dream, one that the entire community can unite behind. In 1935 in Lexington, in the midst of the Great Depression, a man named Hal Price Headley had a dream. Lexington needed a race course. He pulled the community behind him, and the realization of that dream is a race course that's an international icon for thoroughbred racing called Keeneland. In the 1950s, a group of business leaders had a dream about the need to build Lexington's economy. They formed the Industrial Foundation, and the outcome of that was the coming to Lexington of companies like IBM and Square D and Train that ushered in several decades of unprecedented economic growth. In the late 1960s, Mayor Fred Fugazi had a dream about taking the railroad tracks out of Water Street, what is now Vine Street, and opening the way for urban renewal, for this whole complex and for much more that happened in Lexington. And we are the beneficiaries of the realization of that dream. And in the late 70s and early 80s, Don and Dudley Webb had a dream of recreating downtown Lexington and bringing a Final Four here, and they made that dream a reality by getting the community behind it. And I expect there's some of you like me that sat up in those stands and watched Villanova beat Georgetown in the finals of the NCAA tournament in 1985. And then 10 years or so ago, Jim Host had a big dream, along with David Lord and others, about bringing the World Equestrian Games not just to the United States for the first time, but right here to Lexington, Kentucky. Big dreams can happen. Big dreams can come true. And this is another one. It's not about an event. It's about a transformation. It builds on history, and it elevates one of our most precious possessions, Rupp Arena, even further than it's been elevated before. There's probably no good reason I should be here this morning, because when the task force started out, I was a pretty big skeptic. Those of you that went on the task force trip, not the task force, the Commerce Lexington trip to Greenville this year, heard me say that I was a member of the task force, and I commented on how big it was. And I said the only difference between this task force and the Million Man March was that we had a few more women, which we did. But I will tell you that I'm a believer. They've made believers out of me, the mayor and Brent and Stan, the committee chairs, Pam and Will and Luther have pulled this group of 47 people together to forge a strong consensus in support of what you're going to hear about today. So my hat is off to them. Now, the two primary panelists, and my role is just to ask them some questions so that they can unfold this beautiful project for you. Brent Rice. Brent was chair, selected by Mayor Gray to be chair of the task force. Brent and I have been really good friends for a long time, and he is one of the most influential lawyers in Kentucky. He's a founding member of McBrayer, McGinnis, Leslie, and Kirkland, which means he spent 30 years as a partner of one of the folks I'm not allowed to make fun of this morning. And the only thing I'll say about that is that as a result, Brett has a straight ticket to heaven without passing go. I got a wave from the Silver Fox. He's here today. But I can't mention him by name. Kind of like Bobby Knight about UK basketball. The next panelist is Stan Harvey. Stan heads a company called Urban Collage. He was the project manager for the whole project, and that covers a lot of ground. He grew up in Lexington. I found out he and I graduated from the same high school, albeit I graduated when it was a couple of years from just opening, and he graduated when it was about eligible to be put on the National Register of Historic Places, so there was a slight difference. He grew up in Lexington, attended Michigan and Georgia Tech. He is well known for his expertise in planning, design, architecture. He was involved in several key projects around the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, and he's come home to Lexington to help with this and many other projects. So I want you to pay close attention to what they have to say, and first of all, join me in welcoming them today. Guys, we have a great venue. You all pick your spots well. Did you ever expect you'd be in the starting lineup of anything on the floor of Rupp Arena?
I can say that maybe my father aspired that someday I'd be on this floor, but if he had a realistic vision, he would know it would be more in this setting, giving a speech than shooting a jumper.
Yep. Bill, I would say, just sitting here looking around at names like Roby.
You lost your mic.
He's going to bring you in.
There we go. That's better. I was just glancing around, looking up at names like Roby and Macy and Walker, and thinking back to 1976 when Lawrence Welk first came here. And you've had the Rolling Stones, you've had the Boss, and I think it's a real testament, and it validates this whole project when you see 200 people that would pay $25 to come and see the Three Stooges. because that tells us what their need there is for an entertainment district in this city.
He told me he was going to say something about the Three Stooges. Obviously, he wasn't placed under the same constraints that I was. Brent, as chair, you saw this whole project from the highest level. Would you give the audience an overview of the task force? Tell us about some of the site visits that the members made.
Well, I'd be delighted to. First, let me say, Stan, the mayor, Mayor Gray, and myself, we've spoken.
Wait a minute, I've just gotten the hook. I've just already gotten the hook. I'm only 5 minutes into this. The first stooge has shown his true colors. There's a DVD that we're supposed to watch first that's gonna set the background. So let's roll it, gents.
When you think about great cities like Paris and London and New York, there's these public environments like Broadway and Times Square that people view as being recognizable and just communicates creativity.
Having places where culture is offered, art is offered, these sorts of amenities is really important. We know that today, the way that people are choosing their cities, it's more about quality of life, quality of place. We're talking about being competitive in a global economy for talent.
I think there's really sort of a talent drain that happens when you don't have a cultural space where people can go down and have a variety of things to do.
The time is now. Lexington needs to make a move.
Yeah, these are tough economic times, but I've learned in business that there's never a better time to plan for the future than when you are in tough times.
We can't afford not to do this.
We did a competitive study and found out with the space that we have available in Lexington that we're literally losing millions and millions of dollars worth of tourism opportunities coming into downtown. If we're able to enhance the civic center space, we'll be able to bring in a lot more tourism from outside.
Mayor Gray identified several civic and business leaders that he thought would be interested in serving on this task force. We've had over 35 meetings, and it's very gratifying to see how everything's taken place. From the outset, one of our goals was to engage as many people as we could from the community. And when you look at the makeup of the task force of 47 people, it's a very diverse group. But also the community has been very, very involved. We've had 2 public forums. We've had 3 site visits to Columbus, Indianapolis, and Madison Square Garden. And just to see not only the members, but the community get involved, it's been terrific.
One of the things that we tasked our Needs, Use, and Benefits Committee with from the very beginning was not to bring emotion into the equation, but to actually let the data direct us into which direction we wanted to go. There were really 2 things that we thought we'd be able to identify as a benefit through this process. One was to be able to get people from outside of the region into Lexington, to be able to experience all the beauty and the opportunities of things that we have in central Kentucky. And 2 was to bring people from this region into downtown.
We found that Lexington's downtown, once built around the town branch, has sports, arts, entertainment, but it needs room to go together to become a complete and unified district. People need space to come together.
Lexington has a very vibrant downtown community. There's this great sort of feeling of fun, a lot of energy, almost a little bit of a cosmopolitan feel to it. That's what we want to continue to keep going.
The only way that a city and a community can have, it's just like a body, it has to have a heart. And downtown Lexington is the heart of this community. It's really exciting what a well thought out design can do, what a well thought out plan, the impact that it can have is most exciting.
The project has 5 core components. First you have, of course, the Lexington Center, which is the Convention Center and Rupp Arena. We have the Commons, that we call it, which is the Central Park. That'll be a connective tissue, bringing that historical Town Branch Creek back up to the surface again. We have Main Street, getting continuous frontage on Main Street again, and completing, let's say, or recompleting Main Street. We have the High Street lot, which is a perfect opportunity to bring housing back to the downtown area. And lastly, we have what we call the catwalk. The catwalk is the physical connection between the university and the arts and entertainment district.
This arena represents thinking big, being a leader. It will be the hub of a new era in the growth of the city. Something that the people of this community will really be proud of.
What's really inspiring about this project, in my view, is that it has its roots in our rich 237-year history. And a big part of the inspiration of this project is revealing the town branch and bringing it back into our city. It is also about leveraging today what is relevant, what's authentic and unique about Lexington.
We have all of the components to make this a great American city. We simply need to execute the plan that's now in place.
I want to go back to the pioneer spirit of our forefathers. The pilgrims who landed on Plymouth Rock didn't look for security. What security did Daniel Boone ask for when he penetrated the wilderness? And what security did our pioneer mothers and fathers have when they carved their homes out of the western plains? All they wanted was an opportunity. That's all I can offer you folks. And I said, now boys, let's not look for security, let's look for opportunity. If we'll keep that philosophy in mind the rest of our lives in whatever we do, you'll all become great someday.
Okay, Brent.
I think Bill's question was share with the group some of the things you've learned and talk about what the task force did, what we learned, and we're going to get into what our recommendations are. But before we go there, I want to introduce two young men here this morning because they're one of the things that I learned about this community, and that is there's a young generation out there that stay here because they love the city. And they formed a company, it's called Bullhorn. They produced the DVD that you just saw, and they're just so talented. And it's Griff Van Meter and Brad Flowers. Would you guys stand up? Now, Bill a moment ago hit on some of the opportunities that have transformed this city. And a point I'd like to make, if you look back, you look at Henry Clay's railroad 150 years ago when he raised $1 million. People thought, $1 million? Well, look what it did. Look how it transformed this city. Think about IBM, the cost that, whatever was required of the city at that time. Toyota. Think of the World Equestrian Games. Obviously, that was an expense to the city. Keeneland, 75 years ago. But I'll assure you one thing. L.L. Hagen, Preston Madden's dad, they didn't focus on the issues, the problems that were associated with it, how we're going to get all these people on the same team here to pull this off. They focused on the opportunity. And that's what we need to do here. And let's talk about another transformational opportunity. You're sitting right inside it. Almost 40 years ago, Foster Pettit, former mayor here, he'll tell you, he'll give you the history of this place. It's incredible. 6 or 7 leaders in the community, if I can recall a few of them, DeWitt Heisel, Cecil Dunn, W.T. Young, Roy Hostclaw, Labe Jackson, and Bruce Glenn. Mayor Pettit will tell you that they came to him and they said, Foster, you got to do this. You have got to do this. They said, well, where are we going to come up with $37 million? And they said, you'll figure it out, because if we figure it out, they'll come. And we're going to share with you some statistics and some numbers in a little while that Bill Owen and his staff put together for us this week that are just absolutely staggering. You will see the economic impact that Rupp Arena and the Civic Center has had on this community over the last 35 years since it opened. So let me move on to the task force. We started out, like Bill said, there were some skeptics, and there still may be some, but we think we've completed our mission, and that is to give this city a plan for the creation of a arena arts and entertainment district that can lead the city to its third century. We learned so much. I can't begin to tell you everything that we learned. We're going to give you about an hour's presentation of what we did learn, but let me tell you how this all kind of took place and how it shaped up over almost a year now. Bill's right. We had 47 people, and it was a diverse group. We had businessmen, businesswomen. Ann McBair, I see you out there. There was a lot of people in this room that served on the task force. And once everyone got their arms around what we were trying to accomplish, you know, we got to A-plus personalities in the room, everybody settled down, and we focused on the mission. We raised $350,000 privately, not $1 of public money. That was our goal, $350. Actually, I think at last count with the in-kind donations, we're probably at $370, $380. And if it had been going, I think we would have, if we hadn't finished our task at the end of January, we could have probably raised more money. What we were able to do with that $370,000, we were able to leverage that with other studies that had been conducted. For example, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, they had a study that had been commissioned before the task force began to study the convention center. So we were able to leverage that. We were able to leverage traffic studies, et cetera, et cetera. And our best estimate is almost $2 million went into this project, and just hard dollars. But what we found during the process is that the architects, the engineers that came in that responded to the RFPs that we sent out, we were able to get work performed from guys like Rick Eckhoff, Mike Jacobs, very talented people here in our community. We were able to get them basically to provide their services. So all of these plans that you're going to see, a lot of it was contributed. So if you really take a look at the numbers, we probably got somewhere between $3 and $4 million worth of work. We had 3 site visits. The first one was to Columbus. We're going to show you some facts about Columbus. These aren't just speculative things. We're going to show you exactly what the city of Columbus has done. Incredible visit. We met with civic leaders. We met with the mayor. They told us how they created a plan, and the results are just staggering. We visited Indianapolis. Everybody knows what's happening there next, last weekend, I guess it was, but that city's literally changed simply because they had a plan. We visited Madison Square Garden. We needed to learn how can you renovate a $1 billion facility without shutting it down. We learned it's possible, and that's a big part of the equation in this structure that we're sitting in right now. We learned that it is possible. We concluded our study with a report that we think is absolutely the best possible. One thing that was fascinating to me during this process is the architects, the planners that came in from all over the world that wanted this project. We started out, there was a short list of, the response we got from 14 different firms from all over the world, not local. A lot of the local guys participated with them. But these were firms, for example, NBBJ, Los Angeles. They designed Staples Center. They designed Pauley Pavilion. They designed entire Olympic venues. Other firms, HKS out of Dallas, Cowboy Stadium, ever heard of that place? Well, they were here. They attended a basketball game. They could not believe the energy in this place. But at the end of the night, we got a but. But what? But there are so many opportunities in here that you're missing, not just here, but behind these walls. And so I got to visit Cowboy Stadium. I sat with the architect, I toured the facility, and he's right. We need to focus on the opportunity that we have here because it is literally transformational. A lot more to be said. We're going to tell you what we learned, what we did, and our recommendations, so I'm going to pass it off to Stan.
Okay, Stan, why don't you tell the group about existing conditions at Lexington Center and what the feasibility study showed?
Yeah,
think that one of the key things that became clear early on in this process is that while Rupp Arena gets a lot of the attention, including this morning, this is really something about much broader than that and a much bigger opportunity for downtown and for the city and for this region than the Lexington Center and Rupp Arena. That's the heart and the icon, as Holly said, about downtown for the city and Rupp for the downtown. But what the opportunity is illustrated here on this slide, which is all that yellow area are areas that for the most part today are surface parking lots. 46 acres total when you count the Lexington Center, the gray box, owned by the city, in public hands in the middle of a major American downtown. But I think most would say there's clearly some underutilization there. There's an opportunity for economic growth. There's an opportunity to create a real place. The mayor of Columbus, Brent mentioned when he asked us when we went to visit, well, who owns all the land that you're talking about? We said, well, actually the city owns almost all of it. He said, oh my gosh, that took us 3 years just to assemble property. So the opportunity is there. It's a really diverse 46 acres, and the context is diverse. That's what makes Lexington, its downtown, unique. We have great neighborhoods, great historic fabric. We've got 19 acres up on the High Street lot. I think Bill and others maybe salivate when they look in the big picture of that. Flat land, 19 acres assembled right in the middle of downtown next to a major venue. We've got the Town Branch Creek, which unfortunately in Lexington somehow we've forgotten. The heart of our city, the genesis of our city, founded along the banks of that creek. You can see it exposed as you go west, but part of the idea, which I'll talk a little bit more about, is making that a little bit more manifest and making that a centerpiece. And we've got other opportunities to reinvent, both architecturally and from a development perspective. The master planning team led by Space Group came in the interview, and I think that they demonstrated that they saw what this was all about by this diagram. They said, we spent some time, they were from Norway, said, we've tried to understand this town, we've tried to understand what makes it special. One thing that's very unique about this city is it has a very small and compact, walkable downtown, really just on 3 streets, with neighborhoods right up next to it. You never build an interstate through the middle of downtown like most cities. It's very walkable, but yet it's actually relatively constrained. Rupp Arena, which is where that line goes through, is kind of the end of the earth, unfortunately, in a way, today from a development and placemaking perspective. It's kind of the end of downtown, the western end. But I think in the future, their point was it can really truly be the center of a longer and more expanded downtown. If you look to the west, there's even more underutilized property, an industrial mixed-use district, the distillery district. There's the opportunity to tie into more neighborhoods and to really create and expand downtown economically over time. And then Rupp and the Lexington Center, I've said, becomes true to its name. It really is, even geographically, part of the center of downtown. Brent mentioned we've been assisted by some great talent, both nationally, internationally, and locally, and that's, I think, been a hallmark of why we feel so confident in some of the ideas that have come out. The feasibility study team was folks who came into Lexington over the summer, took a look at this facility, at the convention center, at the shops, and everything else that's going on here, tried to get into the details, led by 3 firms, Global Spectrum, arena and convention center operator, MBBJ, Brent mentioned, an architect, and Skanska, which is an international construction firm, really looking at cost and schedule. They quickly identified that we've got a problem. We've got a challenge with our convention center, which was validated and confirmed in the Convention and Visitor Bureau study, that it needs to be slightly larger. We're missing out on certain conventions. I wouldn't consider an overly ambitious expansion. It's still relatively small for a city our size, but it needed to be expanded, which is difficult because of where it sits next to Rupp and with the Mary Todd Lincoln House on the western end. The same could be true for this facility. The more they looked at it, I think they, like most architects, came to this project and said, new would be better. There's a great opportunity here. And the longer they were here and the more we talked and the more we got into the details and the more they looked at this facility, they said, you know, really, this has great bones. It was built to last. It's got a history and a richness that can be celebrated. Maybe there's opportunities, but that would require expanding it as well. So that led to 4 kind of strategic options. Renovate what you have, which might be the cheapest in the short term, but could be argued would be the most expensive in the long term in terms of you're back in the same box literally that you've been in. Build a new arena in the High Street lot, which is the blue R, and renovate this portion of the Lexington Center into more convention space that we need. Or option C or D were variations of a theme. Instead of building a new arena, build a new convention center, either in the Cox Street lot to the west or the High Street lot to the south. I want to stress that we had a really collaborative relationship with the university, with UK Athletics, with the Kentucky High School Athletic Association, with concert promoters. A lot of discussion about what works about this facility and what doesn't. It's 35 years old. Like anything, it needs reinvestment. But some of the things were more pragmatic about how the technology works or how the locker rooms and was there a training room and other things. You've seen actually in the discussion of the new locker room, some of those were things that were all discussed and identified in the feasibility study. But then there's some more big picture things about allowing revenue from premium seating, the upper deck. The bleacher seats are particularly a challenge for the Kentucky High School Athletic Association and for concert promoters trying to sell tickets in the upper arena. So could we look at replacing that and redoing it? This is the image you may have seen before, which is an image of a reinvented Rupp. More seats in the lower arena, actually the ability with an expanded box to add more seats in the lower arena, which is good all the way around. A level of premium suiting, whatever the market would dictate, and that could change over time. If that's a club suite, if that's a so-called loge box where you kind of sit at a table, other opportunities to create additional amenities, and then basically a reconstructed upper deck that's all chairback seats. Modern technology, modern advertising, scoreboards, etc.
Okay, thanks. I want to turn back, revisit for a minute some of what you were talking about. Because I've heard you tell us some stories about things that you learned, Brent, when you talked to some of the people in other cities. And one of the things that we shouldn't have to say to the people in this room is that one of the best ways to improve is to go visit other cities, learn what they're doing, and come back and mimic it. Our chamber trips, for example, have brought back ideas as global as merged government, which we got from Jacksonville, Florida, to as practical as the Herbies, to as fun as Thursday Night Live. So we've done very well by going and taking the best of other cities. Give us a little more color on some of the things you learned and what you heard when you went on these site visits.
Well, let me first start off with, before we go there, Bill, let me go back to the first phone call I literally had after Mayor Gray announced the task force. It was about the following day I got a call from a friend that I hadn't heard from in a while, Steve Sexton. He was president of Churchill Downs. And he's now in Austin, Texas, and he's president of the motorsports track there. Interesting change for him, but he said, I've got a guy I want to have call you. He read about this, and I think he can be helpful. I said, well, who's that, Steve? And he said, well, his name's Mike Evans. I said, great, be happy to talk to him. And I said, wow, what's so important? And he said, well, Brent, he's president of Live Nation Arenas. And he's the guy, when I was at Churchill, that brought me the Rolling Stones and Sting. And he's also the guy that determines where these acts go all over the world. And he's also with the company that owns Ticketmaster. And he also is with the company that happens to manage more groups than anybody in the world. Interesting guy. So he called, insisted on coming in, dropped in one night, we had dinner. And first thing he said, Brent, you know, I just want you to understand what you have here. He said, first of all, you have a terrific group at Lexington Center that operates that facility. They are really terrific operators. He said, but remember this, they can only sell what they have to sell. I said, well, elaborate on that, Mike. And he said, well, I'm in the concert business. I have a hard time selling tickets to upper arenas like you all have. You need to change it up. He said, the groups that I book, now they want to go to modern places. They want modern modern dressing rooms, et cetera, et cetera. I said, okay, I get it. So a little after that, I started noticing that, well, Lady Gaga, here she's going to Yum. You know, that didn't bother me. But then, you know, it wasn't 2 months after that, Elton John, he went to Yum Center, and that ticked me off because, I mean, that guy's been coming here since 1976. Now think about that. So there's a good point there. I mean, there's a fellow that knows what he's talking about, and we need to pay attention to that. The other thing that we found out in some of these case studies, Bill, is that, you know, they focused on what their assets were in the community, and they built around it. Nationwide is probably one of the most eye-opening experiences I think that the task force had. So let me just share with you some of the things that we learned about Columbus, Ohio, when they rolled their sleeves up and they went after it, and here's what they've accomplished in about 10 years' time. They have made the downtown region the largest employment center with 100,000 jobs. There's $100 million in annual tax revenue that's generated downtown. I assume some of you all have been to Columbus. If you hadn't, check out their website, look at it. It is phenomenal. There's been over $1 billion of public-private investment. The office space alone, 1.2 million square feet. Think about that. In literally approximately 10 years' time. Changed the city. Absolutely changed the city. So there was just a really eye-opening experience for all of us. Indianapolis, they had a plan. They were going to become the sports capital of the United States. And you know what? They pulled it off. They have pulled it off. They have 2 phenomenal arenas. They've got 4,600 downtown residential units, and that's what younger generation for. They're just pleading for us to create that here. But you have to have an inspiring place for people to live. No, I'm not being critical of what we have. What we have is terrific, but it could be so much more. And you realize that when you look at these other cities around us, even Knoxville, Nashville, Louisville. Everybody's been to Louisville. We've already talked about Madison Square Garden. That showed us what we needed to learn, and that was that this facility, all the pieces around it, it can be accomplished without closing it down, and that's a big factor for us because we don't have another facility to go to during a reinvention or a renovation. I guess that's it on the site visits.
All right, that's great. If I could have reached in my back pocket, I would have texted Griff to ask him who this Lady Gaga is. But I think I know.
He knows.
I think I know. The images that have appeared in the newspaper that have really grabbed everyone's attention are part of the master plan. Why don't you talk for a minute about and elaborate on the master plan that came out of the work of the task force, Stan?
Well, I think, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, one of the things that we appreciated about the effort that was led by the team was the ability to look beyond just the 46 acres and think about downtown and how this piece could integrate. I've said many times that we're, and the mayor said several times, we're just at step 2 or 3 of a 10-step process. So we've got a long way to go, and you start to see drawings like that, and you think, wow, they got it all figured out. Everything's down there. I see where the loading dock is. I can guarantee you it won't be built exactly like this, but I think what the master plan has given is a vision, which is the most important thing, but also some confidence in some of the details that we feel like we can move forward to the next step of a more detailed study, design and engineering, and financing. This is the overall plan. It basically stretches from Oliver Lewis through the Cox Street lot and then around the new Rupp, which you can kind of see there to the top right, and new development in the High Street lot. But a little bit more of the details. I would suggest to you all this morning that the most important and exciting part of this project is the middle. It is the idea of going back at some level, and if we feel like we haven't exploited and leveraged Rupp Arena, We truly have not exploited some of the physical structure and the historical structure of our town. This is Town Branch, which right now you can see as it comes under Oliver Lewis and then it dives. It goes actually under where you're sitting today in a culvert and goes under Vine Street. Water Street, many of you all know, was named because that's where the creek actually ran. And so the big idea of this plan is a continuous public space system that runs from Isaac Murphy Park in East End at 3rd and Midland through the Distillery all the way through downtown, the Distillery District to South Forbes. That would be a first-class place, a place where, as Gary says, people come together, where events happen. We've already seen the amount of change that little things like Triangle Park ice skating rink and the Fifth Third Pavilion have done at Cheapside. That kind of investment is really what I think is the core of the recommendation, which is let's find a way to create that first-class space and build on our history. These are some of the historic maps that creek runs all the way through. You can see the commons, very appropriately named on old historic maps, about what happened in Vine Street and Water Street, where the markets and other things occurred. Does that mean that we're going to just open the ground and open up sewer culverts everywhere? No. I think that Town Branch is, at some level, can be metaphorical. Bringing water back into downtown, I think the task force saw time and time again in the case studies is very important. And that could be in a variety of settings, more natural settings that exist on the West End to more man-made settings. And this is an example of expanding Triangle Park and how that idea of the commons comes through. And with the new Rupp and new development really becomes a centerpiece in this district that I think probably would be the most exciting mixing bowl of people and activity that would happen not just before games, but at all times downtown. Second piece, had a lot of discussion, Free Rupp. We've talked about this, the idea of expanding it by kind of peeling back the appendages that are around it now. That is existing condition, the red outlines of the Lexington Center shops and the convention center. This is the image you may have seen in the paper. This is looking from Triangle Park on Main Street, looking towards a new front entry. The other advantage is by expanding the box, we actually reskin Rupp, and the kind of brown barn becomes something that's iconic, that reflects the energy and excitement that happens in it every day. We would replace new meeting and exhibit spaces, the hotels and other things all front on this major mixing bowl. And to the right, you can barely see new mixed-use development that comes in on Main Street. The new convention center, I think, has had the most discussion. I think it's fair to say it has some of the most concerns going forward. And we need to kind of take the next step to get those involved and affected in the discussion. But the idea was if the convention center needs to get slightly larger, the task force felt unanimously, particularly the Planning and Design Committee, that the best location was in the Cox Street lot. And in fact, perhaps with the Town Branch Trail and Creek and Commons actually being a public space that maybe even went through the convention center. Really trying to make the convention center a unique place, an experiential place. People have a lot of options to go to conventions, but this about 100,000 square feet of new exhibit space, which actually would arguably be the first thing constructed. Main Street, I already mentioned, kind of the idea that you could create with the Mary Todd Lincoln House and Main Street Baptist and others, kind of more compatible character there that reinforces this gateway, the major gateway into downtown from the west. And then finally, the idea of High Street and the catwalk, major mixed-use development. This idea of the catwalk was something actually that came from UK Athletics. They said, you know, it's only 11 minutes or so to walk from campus to Rupp, but it feels a lot further, partially because of the parking lots you have to go through. So the idea of the catwalk is a literal promenade through the High Street lot to the front door of Rupp towards the university. That could be, particularly for game day activity, a real a synergy of a. We saw that the task force really remarked when Transy walked down from campus down South Broadway to their game, it really struck a lot of people. That kind of procession, I think, could happen here. But mostly it's also about mixed-use development. This is the big economic development opportunity to create new housing, new retail, new office, to expand the downtown and keep growing downtown. Arts education, both a new arts facilities that could be interwoven, and there's already between the Opera House, the Children's Theater, and other cultural facilities that are there. One of the most exciting partnerships that we hope to explore in more detail is the Fayette County School Board voted in January to formally explore relocating the SCAPA, the School for the Creative and Performing Arts, that's presently on the Lafayette campus, as a new 1,200 student K through 12 school downtown. They actually started off downtown. They want to be part of the energy and vibrancy and partnerships that may exist with other arts organizations. That could be both in the arts and entertainment district, or it could be elsewhere in downtown. But I think this would be a phenomenal step forward for the city. And to go with that, we won't forget the dirt and all the practical matters, and that may be some of your all's questions. Issues of how streets are connected. Everyone looks at the drawing and says, where's the parking? 2,700 surface parking lots. Or spaces. A lot of it becomes in structured parking decks that are scattered throughout. That was actually a lesson we saw in Columbus. They consciously did not concentrate parking in any location to get people distributed, both to get out, but also to walk through and enjoy the downtown. Streetscape improvements, parking, environmental enhancements, all of that is part of the plan.
To economic impact. You showed some numbers a moment ago, Brent, from Columbus. What's the economic impact today, and what's the potential with this plan that's envisioned?
Bill, the number that the task force came up with, and again, this is from case studies. We think the economic impact, if this project were brought to fruition, is around $700 million. I think what is a good point to be made here is we were talking about these gentlemen that had this vision 40 years ago. And as I mentioned, Bill Owen and his staff put some numbers together. I want to share those with you this morning because they really tell a pretty good story about the economic impact that just this facility and the convention center has had in this community over the last 35 years. Since 1976, there's been 1,660 events in this facility. UK basketball, 350,000 in attendance per year, times 35 years, 12,250,000 attendees just for basketball. Bill's best guess, Rupp Arena annually, which would include basketball, over 35 years, 750,000 people a year. That's 26,250,000 people. Now, he assures me those are conservative numbers. Let's take a look at the convention center. Attendance approximately 225,000 a year. That equals 7,650,000 annually over the years. And the Opera House, people forget about the Opera House. It's also overseen by Lexington Center. The attendance there annually is about 90,000. So over 35 years, that's 3,150,000. The total, let's round it off at 38 million. Now, talk about economic impact. Forget the attendance for a minute. Think about the number of hot dogs that have been sold. Think about the hotel rooms that have been rented. Think about the beer that's been sold before and after the game. Got you, Ann. Think about that. Think about, I don't know if Debbie Long's out here, but think about the number of Pasta Dudley orders she sold in 35 years. From 38 million people coming through this facility. Now, I don't know the number. I don't think any of us could fathom probably what it is, but I will assure you it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars what the true economic impact is since these guys rolled up their sleeves and they made this place happen. So, with that being said, you see all these banners. We all understand the history of the banners up here, the NCAA championships, the great players. I submit to you there's about 5 or 6 guys from the 70s. If somebody needs a banner someplace, and it might be on the outside of this building, it's those fellas. So Next, let's take a look, a couple of things we didn't mention about nationwide. Now that's existing, that's where we are today, but what if we made these changes that have been proposed, not all at once, but over time? Columbus, here's a great one. Didn't mention it. That district generates $20.4 million annually in state and local income tax revenue. That's a pretty big number. You can do a lot of money. You can do a lot with that. Now let's talk about an expansion to the convention center. As Stan mentioned, Convention Sports and Leisure International, known as CSL, they're the top firm in the country that does these types of studies for convention centers. Their recommendation was to increase the convention center space from its current 66,000 to approximately 100 and 125,000 square feet. If that were done, according to CSL, the number of events in the convention center alone would increase by 50 annually. Think of the economic impact of 50 events going through those doors every year. The out-of-town delegates say would increase by 21%. The estimated direct spending increase, if our civic center were enlarged, would increase from $29 million to $37 million annually. Now that's just direct spending, motel rooms, etc. The overall economic impact on our entire community, job taxes, all that sort of thing that's a result of that, it increases from 42 million to 54 million. Now, that's a study that's conducted by the best in the business. So it's easy to look back and think of the economic impact that we all have shared in the last 35 years, but think about that impact going forward another 35 years. It's huge.
Thank you. One thing I want to pause for a moment and do before I pose the next question. Brent has mentioned Bill Owens several times. Bill is sitting right in front of me toward the back. He's one of those folks that this community owes a huge debt of gratitude to for all the work he's done over many, many years making those economic development numbers possible. So Bill, thank you for everything you've done and continue to do. Stan, you've told us about the master plan. There are several other recommendations from the task. Why don't you run us through those pretty quickly?
Okay. I'll try to be brief. I think in the end analysis, if you look at the task force report, they tried to give a little bit of a charge and a game plan to go forward. What the challenge we are right now is we need the community to pick up the ball and a lot of partnerships and a lot of players to be involved to advance it to the next steps. So they kind of boiled it down to 6 kind of key recommendations. One is this is a $250 to $300 million project just to reinvent the Lexington Center and all the immediate surroundings. That's going to be a large project over several years. It's going to probably, the recommendation was the Lexington Center Corporation carry out the project, but perhaps with dedicated staff that are physically just oriented towards this one project. It's that large. 2, which is the recommendation I personally am the most excited about and I think has the greatest opportunity for the city, is basically to create a permanent task force, kind of christen the town branch partnership, but basically a permanent nonprofit advocacy and fundraising to leverage grants, other fundraising, private investment, just like the task force did, but specifically focused on that commons and all the projects that could exist and all the constituencies who would benefit from East End to Forbes of the projects that could be along that. And so the idea was to create a kind of dedicated advocacy and nonprofit. Obviously, we need to take the next steps. Brent will talk a little bit about project financing and some of the ideas the Finance Committee came up with. We're going to have to continue to bring in the best and the brightest across the country and here locally of design and construction professionals. We want, and this is particularly maybe of interest for those of you in this room, there's a lot of economic development opportunities here. And so having private sector investment and private sector development partners is going to be critically important. And overall, we need to kind of get the overall financing plan and business plan formalized. A lot of people have started to ask about the schedule, which I said yesterday is a very positive sign because I guess that means people are now starting to be anxious to see something happen. And hopefully that's an indication of community support. This year is incredibly important. What needs to happen this year is all of the additional groundwork, both in the financial sense and in the preliminary design and engineering sense, which is related. We have a great vision, but it needs to be tested and refined to the next level. We need to hire and get this team in place that's going to carry out this project over the next 5 years. Governor Beshear, we've been very fortunate, I think believes in the economic value of this project to the state of Kentucky, and recommended $3.5 million in state funds to be matched with $1.5 million here locally to take those next steps. That would continue on into next year. I think at the earliest, if we could get all of the financing and preliminary design and engineering done, the earliest we've said you could see construction begin is 2014. And then it would be a several-year construction process that would be phased, like Madison Square Garden, a lot of the work in the off-seasons, Convention Center probably first, and things that could be as early as 2017, which sounds like a long way away, but in construction sense is tomorrow.
Brent, we can't build it if we can't fund it. I know you've looked awfully hard at that and continuing to.
We had a terrific finance committee in place, chaired by Luther Deaton. I think I saw you over there, Luther. And we identified about 15 possible funding sources. Before I forget this, I see Charlie Barnhart. I didn't want to exclude you as being one of the great architects in the community, so I want to get that in. And one other thing, Bill, before I get this, Bill Owen, it's not just Bill Owen, it's his staff that pull this off day after day after day. And if you think about it, these guys, you know, we always walk in, it's always in great shape, whether it's here, it's in the convention center, whether it's in the retail space. These guys get up every morning, 5:30 this morning just to set this up. You leave, they'll haul it out, and somebody else will be coming in here. So I want to say a special thanks to not just Bill, but his staff as well. But back to your question about the revenue opportunities. We've taken a hard look at it. We've looked at other cities. We've had some of the best consultants in the business come in and share ideas with us and tell us how it's been done in other cities, in other arenas. And I'm going to stick my neck out here, but I really think this project is doable. I'll tell you why. And here's the fun part. You're setting in an economic engine like I don't think any of us can fathom how powerful it really is. And if you don't think so, we just saw this week our basketball coach raised $2.5 million privately to build some locker rooms. Okay? Locker rooms. And those were needed locker rooms, by the way. But let's take a look inside Rupp, and I'm going to show you some of the possibilities. And again, this is not my opinion. These are the experts. If you take a look right over your head, you're missing something. There's not a scoreboard up there. There's not a state-of-the-art scoreboard that has all the modern technology where display advertising can be sold. The reason we don't have it is because the structure won't support it. We now know from some of the top structural people that came in, actually he's from London, England, he's considered one of the top structural engineers in the world, and he told us that this roof can be supported for a state-of-the-art scoreboard. You say, why is that important? Because that is the crown jewel. Give you an example, one of the largest banks in the country, they pay $20 million annually in Madison Square Garden for the rights to that scoreboard and other areas in Madison Square Gardens to display their brand. What's it worth in Cowboy Stadium? One of the largest wireless providers pays $7.5 million for rights in perpetuity to have their name on that. So I don't know what it's worth. I can take a pretty good guess. I think that scoreboard's probably worth $1 million, possibly $2 million annually in revenue. Now, there's a lot of bankers in this room I see today that would make a loan on that all day long. Now, here's the fun part, and this is the conceptual plan that UK Athletics came up with after working very closely with some of these great architects. 26 suites. Now you have to visualize this. If you could take the bottom, the lower bowl and extend it 8 to 10 rows. Then you're removing the upper deck and you're putting in 26 suites around it. Again, this is just conceptual. This isn't done, conceptual. Those 26 suites, let's just go up the road. Let's go to Louisville. It's about 75 suites. Those suites sell for an average of $90,000 a year. Now, I've debated this with some of my friends, including Luther, about what's the value of 26 suites in this arena. Well, if they could get $92,000 a year for 75 suites, I think we have a much bigger brand. I'm going to, again, stick my neck out. I think it's worth between $100,000 and $125,000 a year. And I'll guarantee you, before we leave here this morning, there's probably 8 people that would sign up for that, because it's just not for the rights to attend a basketball game. It's the rights to concerts. It's the rights to regional tournaments, all those sorts of things. So when you add that in the mix, I think the demand is there. So look, we've got to think in terms of $1 equals $10 in bonding capacity. Now that's a rule of thumb. Obviously, it depends on when the bonds are sold, et cetera. But we have to think in that term. So take 25 suites, rounded off at $100,000 a year. That's $2.5 million. That gets you $25 million in bonding capacity. Take a look back up at the crown jewel. Let's take the high side. $2 million annually. That gets you $20 million in bonding capacity. Now, I'm not going to get into all the other opportunities here. The ribbon boards, we've all seen them this week. You see them in the up-to-date arenas that have the ribbon boards. The advertising is just swirling around. People pay a lot of money for that. So we need those consultants to come back. We need them to do a market study. We would have loved to do it, but we had limited funds to tell us exactly what the market is for these things. So now that's just Rupp Arena. Now let's have some real fun. I tested this yesterday. Stan and I did with the Bluegrass Hospitality Association. And we've got to get creative to pull this off. So here's a creative idea for you. Let's say we took one of those suites and we built it twice as large as the other so that it can accommodate 50 people. And we sold stock in that suite. We set up an entity just for the purpose of having ownership in that suite. Let me tell you what they did in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Population, 100,000, pretty good brand there, Green Bay Packers. They raised $67 million selling $250 stock certificates. Now that's a unique brand there too. I didn't realize this. They've got 93,000 people there on a waiting list to get tickets. But you know, if you think about the brand that we have, not just UK basketball, but the city, the love for the city, I'm going to guess that we could do a lot better than Green Bay because they didn't have seats to offer. All they got was a stock certificate to put on their wall and say they supported their brand. Well, let's say we take that suite and we set aside those 50 seats every Sunday night before there's a ball game. From now on, folks, next 40, 50 years, as long as this place stands, or even beyond that, you can structure it that way. And you had a drawing, just like they have Powerball. And the people in Magoffin County, Webster County that bought stock, they're going to be watching that show. They're going to see if they're one of the lucky 25 that got 2 tickets and a parking pass to come to Rupp that week. Now we can make it a little sexier than that. We can have a annual shareholders meeting right here. We can have the coach come in. We can do all those sorts of things. Now, if they can sell $67 million worth of that stock in Green Bay, Wisconsin, I will assure you that if we could get our basketball coach behind a marketing plan like that, who can raise $2.5 million, and he comes back and he wins the national championship, and we want to test this, I'll guarantee you we can raise what they raised. There's a terrific opportunity there because of this. We don't have to raise $250 million to make this happen. That's pure equity. That goes straight. You deduct that right off the estimated number that we need to do this project. It comes right off the top. And it's fun, it's inspirational, it gives people an opportunity to say, hey, I've got ownership in Rupp. So there's an idea. We think that's a real creative idea. Now let's go outside. We learned that naming rights are very, very valuable to facilities, especially ones that are high profile, especially ones that have terrific brands. We've got it. So again, let's take a look at Louisville. Yum pays $1.3 million a year just to put their name on the outside of that building. Now, again, these are the experts. They tell me, they tell Stan, they tell the task force committee, those naming rights are worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million a year if this were a district, if it were new, if it were fresh, and they had the right to put their brand on our brand. So multiple of 1 times 10 again, 2 million, gets you 20 million in bonding capacity. So that's outside. Let's look at other outside opportunities. Stan mentioned the retail opportunities. Do you think a cheesecake factory would come here with this great plan that everybody's seen here in a second? Do you think a Hard Rock Cafe would come? Sure they would. There's lease opportunities. There's land lease opportunities. We're sitting on 22 acres up top. There's a tremendous opportunity for revenue there. How about an amphitheater? Sure. Do you think if it were designed in the area along the park with the walk in the water, do you think that'd be a pretty neat feature for this city? You think somebody would pay something to put their brand on that amphitheater? Of course they would. Those are just sponsorship rights, and we think that those are probably in the neighborhood of $10 to $12 million, but there's so many other, those are just sponsorships. So let me clarify that. Naming opportunities and suites, et cetera. But we also know that there's facility fees, the ground leases, I mentioned those, local parking, local funds from parking, water, sewer, parks. It's there. State economic development funds, possibility. State dollars, we hope so. That's what we're trying to do, is get this in a position that we can ask for those funds like Louisville did. They got $75 million. Surely we're entitled to something. So to answer your question, Bill, it is absolutely possible. We have to go to the next step, get the top talent again, and help us figure it out.
I'm going to wrap us up real quick because we're in overtime and some of the fans are heading to the exits. Any final words of wisdom from either of you two before I wrap us up?
Go ahead.
I mean, Brent has talked a lot and said a lot about potential funding sources, and I think that's what makes us optimistic. But I want to leave you all with the idea that we really need a lot of community support to take the next steps. Every step along the way will build more momentum, more confidence, and hopefully more inspiration. But it's going to take a lot of heavy lifting still to do. We got a lot of work to do, and we'd like to get started this summer.
Brent?
I do have an ending thought or two I'd like to leave with everyone. First of all, I mentioned Griff and Brad over here. That's the generation that we want to make sure stays here, that doesn't leave. And for us to do that, we need to reinvent, we need to reinvest. We said yesterday, the Bluegrass hospitality folks, people in hotel, restaurant business, they understand how important it is to invest in your brand, to continue to grow it, to protect it. That's what this city needs to do. Now, I've asked a buddy of mine from Louisville to come here this morning. Where are you, RC? RC Schindler? He's over here. I want to ask RC and all the young men at his table to stand up just a second. I want everybody to take a look. Now, these guys, most of them got up this morning. They've driven from Louisville. They've driven from Versailles. Thank you. And I asked them to come to make a point. Now, here's my second point. These are the young men that and ladies that we want to keep in this community. Now, these are the type young men and ladies that we want to lure here. And the way we do that is we have an inspiring inspiring downtown. We have events, we have things for them to go to. Now let me tell you a quick story about RC. RC's partner, they started a business in Knoxville, Tennessee, in a kiosk in a mall, selling the predecessor of this, a cell phone. Now, it wasn't that long ago, and here's their vision. They knew that they could take that phone and they could market all over the country, and they grew it, and they grew it, and they grew it. They've got 500 locations now. They have 4,000 employees now. And they have energetic, bright young men. If you walk in any of their stores, and I'll go ahead and tell you it's Verizon Wireless stores here in Lexington, you will see that those are the type young people that we need to attract and keep here, because they're the future. It's that simple. We all had this great run here for 35 years at this facility. We've got to build another one for that generation and to keep this generation here. So let me close with this one thought. This is a group of people, just like the hospitality group yesterday, that understand the importance of reinvesting. You all are probably top group in town along with them. You understand that. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. We have a choice here. We can be, and I don't think we want to be, this device. That's a BlackBerry. We all probably had one at one time. And if you look at the history of that study, and RC kind of directed me in that direction, those were very, very smart guys. I mean, they were way ahead of everybody else. They had a terrific piece of technology that was as hot as it could be. But there was two of them. They argued about who was doing what in the company, and they both decided they wanted to be the co-CEOs. Well, why were they the co-CEOs? They sat on their laurels. They didn't pay attention to research and development. And guess what? Along came this guy. Palo Alto, California, Steve Jobs. Now there's a guy that continued to reinvent and reinvest. And look what he's done. And he isn't stopping. Look at his iPad. The last 18 months, he's come out with 3 different ones. That's the point, folks. We have to focus up on this opportunity. We can't sit on our laurels, and we got to make sure this continues to be a great city. Thank you very much.
I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank all of you. I want to thank the sponsors, Mike, Fifth Third, and the others for making this a great program. We did run a little bit into overtime, but with 2 lawyers and a planner, what the hell did you expect? I would like to dismiss us all this morning by first asking everyone, don't leave, stand up. We're going to dismiss with something you can tell your kids and your grandkids about. Look up in the stands, and now on 3, everybody do the Y. 1, 2, 3. Go home and tell everybody you've done the Y in the middle of Rupp Arena. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and thank all of you for coming out. And also, Bill made comment about what we've learned from our leadership trips. June 4th through the 6th, we're going to San Antonio, and guess what San Antonio's doing? Expanding out the Riverwalk in their downtown. Thank you all for coming. Bill, thank you very much for emceeing, and have a great day.